This video is brought to you by America First Insight. Help support the growing conservative movement by becoming a member today. And if you want to support this channel, you can also use the code REAL when becoming a member. Thank you and enjoy the video. As everyone knows, in the last couple of days, there's been multiple Republican states to announce that they're redrawing their congressional maps for 2026. And that's a big deal because we're not talking about just a single seat in Louisiana and that's it. No. We're talking about up to 6 congressional seats in places like Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, and of course, Louisiana. And that doesn't even factor in what potentially could happen in a state like Texas by 2028. So we're talking about multiple seats flipping from the Democrats to the Republican Party. And that's why Democrats right now, they're in a complete panic. They know that this could be the difference between a Democrat or Republican majority. And that's why right now Democrats are preparing a new redistricting plan for 2028. Yeah, you heard that right. They're preparing plans not for this year, but for 2028. That's a big deal because that essentially means that they know that they can't really respond this year. They can't respond to what Alabama may do, what South Carolina is likely to do, Tennessee, Louisiana. They can't do anything this year. That's very noteworthy, and that's why right now they're preparing plans for 2028. This week's Supreme Court ruling weakening the Voting Rights Act has nullified some of the Democrat resistance that kept many states from pursuing extreme gerrymanders this cycle. That new energy could put a fresh crop of blue and even purple seats on the board as potential redistricting targets ahead of 2028, according to more than 20 federal and state Democrat lawmakers Axios spoke to. Even some legislators who previously resisted redistricting in their states appear to be warming up to the idea after Wednesday's decision. That is an important note that, yeah, ever since this decision, we've seen more and more Democrats publicly say, we got to redraw Illinois, we got to redraw California again. We got to gerrymander New York, New Jersey, etc. That is true. But the more you look at it, the more it becomes apparent that even though there is some momentum building on the left to redraw some of these seats, they still have some significant problems when it comes to redistricting. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, in an interview with Politico, named New York, Illinois, Colorado, and Maryland as possible targets, but the list could go well beyond that, with House Democrats Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar telling Axios his home state may take another bite of the apple after drawing a new map for 2026. We'll see what southern states do leading into 2028 when California will respond just like we responded to Texas, Aguilar said. We're not going to back away from a fight. So it's pretty clear that, yeah, Democrats are now more ready to gerrymander a state like Illinois and New York. Even though they were trying beforehand, they're going to try even harder this time around. Remember, a state like New York, they try to redraw that map, but they really couldn't. The Supreme Court shot that down, so they really can't. These other states as well, they're going to have some major issues with some of these states, and we'll get to that. In fact, Axios right here, they actually list where Democrat redistricting efforts stand for 2028. And the first state is Maryland. The state House delegates passed a bill in February that would have likely turned its 8-1 Democrat map into a 9-0-1. State Senate President Bill Ferguson refused to bring the measure to a vote. And that's going to be the first major issue. Even though Democrats have to respond to Alabama and Tennessee, many of these state legislators, for whatever reason, there's a bunch of reasons why they don't want to really redraw again. That's going to be the first major hurdle in a bunch of these states. These top Democrats in some of these areas, they really don't want to redraw. And in Maryland, the state Senate president, he was clear that no, he does not want to bring the measure to a vote. And really, it makes sense because for those that don't know, the last time Democrats tried this back in 2021, they got their asses kicked in court by Larry Hogan. It was a disaster, and they were forced to draw a more fair map. That's what happened. And the same thing would happen again, more than likely. If not, make the map even more friendly to the GOP. So that's the first major issue in a bunch of these states. They're really, even with this Supreme Court ruling, yeah, it might make Democrats more likely to do it, but you have to understand that still in a place like Maryland, the courts are likely to strike it down yet again. That's the first major issue. And even though with Maryland, we're not talking about a net gain of like 3 seats for Democrats. You're going to get 1. I know you turn into a safe Democrat seat, but really, you're not gaining 3 extra House seats in Maryland. You're gaining like 1. Let's see if Ferguson loses re-election. He was the obstacle. One state House delegate told Axios, and again, that they're blaming this Ferguson guy, and they do, apparently he has a major primary battle going on, so he may lose, and yeah, maybe they try to force it through, but the issue is still the courts. The courts back in 21 made it clear that, no, you can't play these games in Maryland. We're going to strike down the map. So that's the first major issue for Democrats. And I wouldn't really focus on Maryland because best case scenario, you gain 1. Worst case scenario, you lose an extra House seat. You can make the map in Maryland much more fair, which in turn would give Republicans an extra seat. In fact, even Democrats here are admitting that the state Supreme Court is a major hurdle. That's going to be the biggest issue. Next up is Illinois. We can't just sit back and watch Republicans in the courts erode voter right protections and do nothing. Ford, who is running in November for a safely blue House seat, told Axios, I find it funny it's always about voter right protections and democracy. That's seriously the argument Democrats are pushing. Even though all the Supreme Court said was, hey, you can't use race to draw maps, which you would argue would make things more fair, more equal, because if they're not using race, or they shouldn't, wouldn't that make things more equal? Either way, though, you get the point that, yeah, Democrats, they're using democracy and voter right protections and all this other crap as an excuse. There is a 17-0 map out there, and that's the nuclear option in Illinois. Yep, it could be done. But what will is there to do the nuclear option? I don't think that's there. That is an extremely noteworthy issue for Democrats, that even in Illinois, when you can realistically gain 2 more House seats and still make every seat safe Democrat, they really don't want to do it. And that's mainly for 2 reasons. A, the 17-0 map, not only does that look hideous, but that could potentially blow up in the Democrats' face, because that's a dummy mander waiting to happen. Republicans have 1 good year. Guess what? Republicans gain a couple House seats. So that's the first issue with the 17-0 map. The second problem, and this is a major issue that Democrats really don't want to acknowledge, is the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus. This is an extremely influential and powerful caucus in the state legislature. And guess what? They really don't want to do what Democrats want to do or have to do to achieve even a 16-1 map. The only way they could achieve that is by splicing up Chicago 15 different ways. And that's already bad enough. But on top of that, for this plan to even work, they have to gut these majority black districts. And well, that's a big no-no within the Democrat Party, especially in Chicago, especially in Illinois. We're not talking about like Oregon. This is Illinois. You have to gut these majority black seats to accomplish this. And let's be honest here, that's not going to happen. That's going to be a big no-no. You're going to have a lot of groups saying, fuck you. You're not going to do this. You could maybe get around it with a 15-2 map, but when you start talking about a 16-1 or even a 17-0 map, you need to gut these districts for that to work. And honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. So Illinois, maybe they do it, but according to Axios, there really isn't an appetite there to do that. And it keeps getting worse for Democrats, because even in New York, and that's the next state up, they're going to have issues there. Even though it's very easy to draw a very Democrat map in New York, there are so many issues working against Democrats that I don't think it's even possible, even before 2030, to get this through. Because according to Kathy Hochul, she's working with a legislator to change New York's redistricting process. Okay, that seems simple. Well, here's the issue. According to Axios, the state has a bipartisan redistricting commission that could be overridden by a constitutional amendment passed by 2 separate sessions of the state legislature and a public ballot initiative. Notice what that says here. Not just a ballot initiative, but 2 separate sessions. So basically, even if the legislature is able to get it through in 2 separate sessions, that might be pushing it. I guess it's possible based on how they word it. But okay, let's say they get it on the ballot before 2028. You still got to pass it through a referendum or a public ballot initiative. And honestly, I don't think it's going to pass. Because you're asking voters to gut this commission. I know it's New York, but I'm pretty sure the commission passed overwhelmingly. People supported it by a big margin. Could that change now? I guess. But that's the issue here. Democrats in a place like New York, they have all these laws in place where they really can't do anything. And even if they do, you're talking more about 2030, if I'm understanding this correctly. So is it possible? I guess. But before 2028? That's a big question. And even with New York, every time they try to do this stunt, it fails. Remember what happened in 2022? Democrats tried to play games and it failed miserably. It blew up. It was hilarious. And you could argue that was the reason Republicans even got a House majority in 2022, because Democrats in New York fucked up. And of course, we're talking about Colorado, again, another state where I don't think it's possible. The problem Democrats have is, again, it's another ballot initiative. And apparently it's not a simple majority. I believe for it to pass, it needs 55% of the votes. And I think Harris got like 55% of the vote in Colorado. So do the math there. It's going to have a very difficult time at passing. So that's another state where the timing really isn't there. They really don't got the votes, and the way they have to get it through, I guess, is possible. But even if they win, you could argue it's for the 2030 redistricting, not for 2028. So that's another issue for Democrats. And of course, you got California. Of all the states here, I actually think California is the most likely to redraw again, because all they have to do is pass another bullshit initiative and call it a day. They need a simple majority. And yeah, you might be pushing it for going for a 52-0 map. That would look hideous again. But theoretically, all you need is a simple majority. But is it going to happen by 2028? That's a different story. And there's a big question as to, do Democrats push it and go for 52-0? Yeah, it would all be safe Democrat, but at some point, even your own voters would probably begin to push back a little bit. And again, when you do 52-0, you have to splice up a place like LA 30 different ways. And everybody knows there's a bunch of majority-minority seats in LA, just like there are in Chicago. That's the issue here. At some point, maybe you go for a net gain of like 3, but when you start doing 52-0, it becomes a question as to, is it really feasible to get it through not just the legislator, but another initiative? At some point, people are going to get sick of redistricting in California every 2 years. There's another initiative on redrawing the maps again. Oh, the bipartisan commission, it's dead once again. So the more you look at it, and there's other states mentioned here as well, like New Jersey, Wisconsin, Washington, even Oregon, and they're mentioning places like Pennsylvania and Minnesota. But the reality is, all these states have the same issues. Legally, they really can't do much in New Jersey. And the timing of it, best case scenario, by 2028. Yet again, you could get a referendum on the ballot. That's best case scenario. And even then, the state legislator may not support it. Place like Wisconsin, that all hedges on the fact that Democrats get a trifecta. That's not a guarantee. Washington, they need 2/3 of both chambers. That's possible. But again, is the appetite there to gut the commission? I don't know. Oregon, it's very difficult. Even they're admitting that it's not feasible at this time. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota, Republicans control a chamber and all the state legislators. So do the math, guys. There is realistically like one, maybe two states here that you could say, yeah, they could probably redraw by 2028, realistically. And that's like California and maybe Illinois. Outside of that, the rest of these states, they're borderline wish cast. I don't see Maryland doing it. Is it possible? Yes, it is entirely possible, especially after the Supreme Court decision. Maybe they're more motivated, I guess. But even in this article, they're admitting that Democrats still really don't want to do this. They really don't want to do 17-0 in Illinois. They really don't want to splice up Oregon or Washington, and legally, they really can't. That's the problem here. There are so many issues Democrats have to deal with. Republicans, meanwhile, what do they have to worry about? In a place like Texas, they can do whatever they want, and nobody can do anything about it. Same thing with Louisiana, Tennessee, South Carolina. Democrats really can't do anything about it. Nothing's stopping the GOP because they don't have these goofy laws in place that, funny enough, are actually backfiring on Democrats. They have to adhere to the laws they created. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.